When I turned 66, I used my retirement savings to surprise my son's family with a luxury trip to Italy. 7 days, 5-star hotels, private guides. Everything was paid in full, under my name. I thought it would be the perfect way to reconnect. But 1 week before departure, my name vanished from the itinerary, replaced by his mother-in-law. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I smiled, packed my bags, and handed my son a document that made him go completely silent. You see, I'd learned one thing raising a man who forgot who raised him. Kindness without boundaries invites betrayal. Linda hadn't felt excitement like this in years. The moment the real estate agent handed her the final check for her old home, something fluttered in her chest, an emotion she hadn't welcomed in a decade. Freedom. Not the bitter kind she'd tasted after burying her husband 10 years ago, but something new, sweeter, hopeful. After decades of caregiving, budgeting, and survival, she finally had enough to breathe. She stood in her small, modest apartment that afternoon, staring at the Italian brochure spread across the dining table. Venice, Florence, Rome. 7 days of hand-picked excursions, wine tastings, gondola rides, and sunlit walks through cobblestone streets. She imagined herself beside the Trevi fountain, not alone this time, but laughing with her son Jason, holding her grandson's hand and sipping espresso while Kayla snapped photos of her pasta. This wasn't just a vacation. This was redemption. For all the birthdays she had spent alone after Jason got married. For every Mother's Day that came with a generic card and a quick call. For every time Kayla called last minute to cancel dinner because something came up. Linda had stayed silent through it all, convincing herself it was just the season of life. Young families get busy. Things would get better. So she planned the trip. Not a weekend getaway, but a full package luxury experience for 4. Flights, hotels, private tours, paid in full. She used part of the money from the house sale, the rest from years of disciplined saving. She made sure the suite in Rome had a balcony for morning coffee, and the hotel in Venice had a children's playroom so her grandson could run free. Linda had even called Jason before booking anything. "I want to do something special," she'd said, her voice trembling with both fear and anticipation. Jason had paused on the other end of the line. "You mean, like a cruise?" "No," she'd laughed. "Bigger, Italy, all of us, my treat." There was silence, then a sound that made her heart leap, a warm, genuine chuckle. "Mom," he'd said, "I don't even know what to say. You don't have to do this." "But I want to. You all have done so much for me, and I've never taken you anywhere." He sighed. "Okay, if you're sure. Kayla will love it. And Liam's never been on a plane before. This will mean so much." She remembered hanging up, her hands shaking, not from fear this time, but from joy. For once, she felt seen, needed, part of something again. The next few weeks flew by in a flurry of bookings, confirmations, and little joys, like choosing the perfect tour through the Vatican or reserving a gelato tasting for Liam. Jason promised to help with passports. Kayla texted her back with a thumbs-up emoji. Not much, but more than usual. Linda even splurged on matching luggage sets and custom travel pouches, one for each of them. She placed them carefully in her closet, running her hands over the tags she'd embossed with their names. Hers read, Mom. Not Linda, not Grandma, just Mom. Because that's who she still wanted to be. 2 weeks before the trip, Jason dropped by unexpectedly. He brought Linda's favorite apple Danish and hugged her tighter than usual. They sat at the kitchen counter, coffee steaming between them. He looked tired but happy. "I was just telling Kayla," he said, "you're something else. Most people your age would be sitting around crocheting, and here you are planning a full-blown adventure." Linda smiled. "You think I'm crazy?" "No," he said. "I think you're incredible. Honestly, you're the strongest woman I know." That moment stayed with her for days. She replayed it while folding clothes, packing travel bags, even when she was brushing her teeth. For once, her son saw her, not as a burden, not as a background character, but as the woman who'd raised him, still capable, still full of life. Of course, she noticed things too. The way Kayla never called to confirm anything directly. How she changed the subject whenever Linda brought up the trip. How Jason hesitated each time Linda offered to include his mother-in-law in one of the dinners they were planning abroad. But Linda brushed it off. Families were messy. Relationships had ebbs and flows. What mattered was the experience, the memories. This trip would be the reset button they all needed. One morning, she mailed a thank you card to her travel agent with a handwritten note. "This is more than a vacation. It's my chance to feel like a mother again." She sealed it with a quiet hope tucked in her heart. Maybe, just maybe, when they got back, things would be different. Maybe she wouldn't feel like a guest in her own son's life anymore. The email arrived on a Thursday morning, just as Linda was finishing her second cup of coffee. The subject line read, "Final itinerary, Rome to Venice." Her heart skipped. She opened it immediately, already picturing herself printing it out, slipping it into the folder she'd labeled Family Trip, Italy. She scanned the PDF attached, flights, hotel bookings, tour schedules, but her smile faded fast. Passenger 1, Jason Miller. Passenger 2, Kayla Miller. Passenger 3, Liam Miller. Passenger 4, Evelyn Rhodes. She stared at the fourth name, Evelyn Rhodes, Kayla's mother. Her breath caught in her throat. She blinked, scrolled up, back down. Surely it was a mistake, a typo, but the confirmation number matched the one she'd received weeks ago, the one linked to her account, the same one tied to the credit card she had used to book every detail. Her name, Linda Miller, was nowhere. Hands trembling, she refreshed the email, checked her spam folder, then logged into the travel portal. But it was all the same. She had been removed, replaced, and no one had told her. The room spun. For a long minute, she just sat there, heart pounding against her ribs. Then she picked up the phone and called Jason. He answered after 3 rings. "Hey, Mom, what's up?" "What's going on with the itinerary?" she asked, her voice trying to stay steady. A pause. "Oh, yeah," he said, dragging the words out like molasses. "We made a few changes." "I noticed," she said. "I'm not listed anymore." "Yeah, listen, Mom, we were thinking. Maybe it's better if you sit this one out." Linda went cold. "I paid for this trip," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why would I sit it out?" Jason sighed. "We didn't want to upset you, but Kayla's mom hasn't traveled in years. She's never been out of the country and, well, Kayla really wanted her to experience it." "And I don't?" Linda asked. "It's not that," he said quickly. "It's just, we thought you might be more comfortable here. The flight's long, the schedule's packed, and you've been through a lot lately." Linda stood up, heart racing. "Jason, are you telling me I'm being replaced on a trip I paid for without even being consulted?" "It's not like that." "Then what is it like?" There was silence, awkward, heavy, full of cowardice. "We just made a judgment call." "A judgment call," she repeated, nearly laughing. "On my dime." He didn't respond. She wanted to scream, but her voice betrayed her. "Jason, how could you?" "Mom, please don't make this harder than it needs to be," he said. "It's already done. The changes are final. Everything's been rebooked." She sank back into the kitchen chair, numb, her hands clenched around the phone. "Do I at least get a refund?" she asked. Another pause. "We had to pay change fees. It didn't work out that way." Of course it didn't. She ended the call before he could say anything else, then sat in silence for a long time, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the wall clock, each sound louder than her own breath. She looked at the suitcase in the corner, the one she'd spent weeks packing. It still had her travel pouch labeled Mom. She thought about the matching set she'd bought for everyone, Jason, Kayla, Liam, and Evelyn. The bitterness settled in slowly, not like a slap, but like frost, creeping, paralyzing. She had gone from center to outsider, from honored matriarch to invisible footnote. No fight, no warning, just quietly erased. She picked up the itinerary again and studied it. They hadn't even changed the billing details. Every reservation still linked back to her account. The wine tour in Tuscany, the private Vatican guide, the hotel suite overlooking the Grand Canal. All of it, booked by Linda Miller, enjoyed by someone else. She tried to imagine Evelyn's reaction, smiling, sipping Prosecco, telling the waiter how lucky she was to have such thoughtful kids. Would she even know the truth? Would Jason and Kayla let her believe they had paid for the whole thing? Linda wasn't sure what hurt more, being replaced or being replaced without a second thought. She didn't cry, not yet. It was too soon for that. Instead, she stared at the screen, cold logic overtaking pain. Her mind started to race, not with emotion, but with calculation. They thought she was old, weak, easy to overlook. They forgot she had built their lives, brick by brick, dollar by dollar. And they were about to remember. The memories came without warning. They arrived in pieces. Jason's tiny feet running across the kitchen tiles, his arms wrapped around her neck after every scraped knee. His sleepy voice whispering, "When I grow up, I'll take you to Italy, Mom, just you and me." Back then, Italy had been nothing more than a photo in a library book, a dream built from borrowed pages. Linda would smile, tousle his hair, and nod. "I'll hold you to it," she'd say. She had held on longer than she realized. The kitchen felt colder now. The morning light, once gentle, now seemed to expose everything. She picked up the travel folder, now just a relic of hope, and tossed it on the counter. It landed with a soft thud, like a closing door. Later that evening, she sat down at her laptop, not to rebook or revise, but to know, to make sense of what had happened. She logged into the airline portal again. She clicked, Manage Reservation. Then, purely out of habit, she clicked Billing. And that's when she saw it. The primary card on file wasn't hers. It was her name, but not her card. Confused, she opened a separate browser and logged into her credit card account. Everything looked normal at first, but under authorized users, there it was. A second card, issued in her name, sent to her old address, her old house, the one Jason and Kayla had moved into right after she sold it. Her heart pounded as she clicked through the recent charges. Every line item matched the Italy trip, but not just flights and hotels. There were purchases from luxury boutiques, online designer stores, a $3,200 charge at a high-end leather goods website. Linda scrolled faster, her hands icy. A name popped up next to one of the shipping confirmations, Kayla M. Her stomach turned. They had ordered a custom handbag, Italian leather, imported, shipped express, purchased under Linda's name, on Linda's account, with Linda's money, hidden beneath the camouflage of trip expenses, masked behind gratitude and politeness. Linda reached for a pen and paper. She began writing everything down, dates, times, amounts. Not to confront anyone yet. She needed to see the full picture first. The betrayal wasn't just exclusion. It wasn't just being pushed aside for someone else's mother. It was this quiet, clinical kind of theft, disguised as family, dressed up in casual deception. She remembered the way Jason smiled that day in her kitchen, called her the strongest woman he knew. She remembered how proud she felt, like something had finally turned around. But now, that memory felt like poison. She looked around her apartment, plain, modest, cluttered with quiet dignity. She had sold her house to make things easier for Jason's family. She thought they needed the space more, that it would be better for Liam to grow up with a backyard. So she moved into a smaller place. Didn't complain, didn't ask for much. And now they'd used her name, her identity, to earn credit card points for luxury bags. Used her dream to fund their indulgence. Used her absence to make room for someone they deemed more important. She opened another tab and checked the credit card's reward points portal. Jason had been transferring points to Kayla's personal shopping account, all under Linda's name. She stared at the screen for a long time, her eyes dry but burning. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a mistake. It was a decision. They had calculated her generosity, weaponized it, and when it was no longer convenient, they had erased her. Linda stood, walked slowly to the closet, and pulled out the travel pouches she'd made. She ran her fingers across the embossed names again. Hers read, Mom. Jason's read, Son. Kayla's, daughter-in-law. She grabbed Kayla's and dropped it in the trash. Then she picked up her phone and called her bank. She asked for the fraud department. Ma'am, the woman on the other end said gently, if you didn't authorize these charges, we can dispute them. Linda exhaled. Don't cancel it yet, she said. Just flag it for now. Understood. She wasn't ready to burn it all down, not yet. First, she wanted to see how far they were willing to go. The morning sun filtered through the windows as Linda arranged the danishes on the serving plate. She brewed Jason's favorite dark roast, placed Liam's juice box next to his napkin, and lined up the printed documents on the table like puzzle pieces. The house smelled warm and inviting, like any other goodbye breakfast. Except this wasn't a farewell. It was an ambush. Thanks for having us over, Mom, Jason said as he stepped inside, holding Liam's hand. Kayla followed, perfectly coiffed, already dressed in flight-ready athleisure. Of course, Linda replied, her voice soft. It's a big day. I thought we could have one last breakfast together before you head off. They sat around the table, unaware of what was coming. I printed something for you, she said, sliding the papers across the table. Jason picked them up first, brow furrowed. Kayla leaned in. What's this? Receipts, Linda said. Itemized, from my credit card. Every flight, every hotel, every tour. And those extra charges, the ones for handbags and express shipping, those are there too. Kayla's face stiffened. Jason blinked. Mom, why are you bringing this up now? Because, she said steady, I want to hear you say it out loud, that you used me, that you replaced me, and that you thought I wouldn't notice. Jason looked around nervously. Liam munched his pastry, oblivious. It wasn't like that. You said this was your gift. And gifts come with honesty, Linda interrupted. But you didn't tell me. You erased me from the trip I paid for. You used my name, my credit, even my good intentions, to buy things for yourselves. And then you replaced me with someone who didn't lift a finger. Kayla shifted in her seat. This is really not the time. No, Linda said. This is exactly the time. She pulled out her phone and tapped play. Jason's voice filled the kitchen, recorded days earlier in a moment of panic. She's not going, but if we leave it under her name, we get the perks. Kayla can use the points later. It's fine. She won't care. Jason's face drained of color. You recorded me? I recorded the truth, she said, because apparently that's the only way to get it anymore. There was a long silence. Then Jason leaned forward. Mom, you're blowing this out of proportion. No, she said, calm as ever. I'm correcting the proportion. He stood up, angry now. So what? You want us to cancel the trip? You want to embarrass us? We're already packed. Liam is excited. Don't ruin this. Linda didn't flinch. She reached into a folder and pulled out a manila envelope. Then let me ruin something else, she said, sliding it across the table. Kayla picked it up this time. She opened it, read the document slowly, then looked up, stunned. This is a property deed. Correct, Linda said. To the house you're living in, the one I bought in full, the one I let you move into after I sold mine. Jason grabbed the paper. Why does it say it's owned by Liam? Because it is, Linda said. 2 weeks ago, I transferred the deed. It's in a trust under his name, effective immediately. Neither of you have legal rights to it anymore. Kayla's jaw dropped. You can't do that. I already did. Jason's voice cracked. Why would you do this to us? Because you thought I was powerless, Linda said. You treated me like background, like an ATM with a smile, like a placeholder until someone younger, more convenient came along. Kayla stood up. We've been good to you." "No," Linda said. "You've been polite. There's a difference." Jason looked at the paper again. "We live there. That's our home." "And it still can be," Linda said, "as long as you remember whose name is on the title. And why." Liam looked up at her, crumbs on his cheek. "Grandma, are you mad?" Linda softened. She knelt beside him. "No, sweetheart. Grandma just needed to remind the grown-ups how to tell the truth." She stood, faced her son and daughter-in-law, both now pale and speechless. "You leave in 2 hours," she said. "Enjoy Italy, really. I hope it's everything you wanted." Jason opened his mouth, then closed it again. Kayla sat down slowly, folding the paper in her hands like it might disappear. Linda walked to the door and held it open. "Next time you plan a trip," she said, "pay for it yourselves." Then she smiled. "And remember to invite the person who built your life for you." The next morning, Linda packed in silence. She folded her clothes with precision, slipping them into a suitcase that felt far too light for how heavy the day was. The house, the one she had once dreamed would become a safe haven for Jason's family, echoed with a new kind of emptiness. Not the loneliness she had come to know over the years, but a hollowing, a final release. She didn't cry. Not when she zipped her suitcase, not when she unplugged the kettle, not when she left the envelope with the spare keys on the kitchen counter. She had cried enough already, silently, invisibly, behind closed doors. What came now wasn't sadness, it was clarity. Jason hadn't shown up again. After storming out the day before, he hadn't called. Kayla had tried, once. A half-hearted voicemail saying, "Let's just talk this through." Linda hadn't replied. She left that morning without another word, stepping into the cab with her head high. Her destination wasn't a resort, a cruise, or a vacation she had paid for and been excluded from. It was something far better, a quiet seaside apartment she had secretly leased weeks ago, when the doubts had first crept in. The ocean welcomed her with open arms. The complex was modest, filled with retirees who nodded and smiled as she passed. Her new neighbors were kind, unintrusive. No one expected anything from her. No one used her name to sign for things she didn't know about. For the first time in years, Linda felt unburdened. She decorated slowly, a plant near the window, a small bookshelf, a photo of Liam, just him, no one else, next to her bed. She didn't cut ties with her grandson. He was a child. He didn't choose the deception. 1 week passed. Then quietly the first stone dropped into the pond Jason and Kayla had built on shaky ground. Kayla received a letter, not from Linda, but from a lawyer. It was simple, unemotional, legal. The trust established in Liam's name had been dissolved. The house they lived in, technically still owned under Linda's name, had been sold, effective immediately. Proceeds redirected. No explanation, no apology. There would be no inheritance, no fallback plan, no safety net waiting at the end of the path they had paved with entitlement. Kayla called Jason in a panic. She sold it. The house. She actually sold it. Jason didn't believe her. She wouldn't. She wouldn't do that to Liam. But she had. When they called the lawyer, they learned the truth. Linda hadn't just made an emotional decision. She had made a legal one. Airtight and irreversible. The house had been hers, bought with the remaining insurance money from her late husband and a series of savvy investments no one ever gave her credit for. She had simply let them live there out of kindness. Now, that kindness had expired. They had 60 days to vacate. Jason drove to her new place the next morning. He didn't knock. He sat in the car for over an hour, gripping the steering wheel, staring at her building. He watched as Linda came out wearing a wide-brimmed hat and a linen blouse, walking slowly toward the water with a book tucked under her arm. She didn't see him, or maybe she did, but she didn't stop. Inside the glove compartment sat a torn envelope, the same one that once held a handwritten Mother's Day card back when he was 10, back when things were simple, when his promises were still made with sincerity. Now, All of it felt too far gone. At the beach, Linda sat beneath a striped umbrella and opened her book. She didn't think about the house, or the bags, or even the trip to Italy that never was. She thought about the breeze, the salt in the air, the way the waves kept coming over and over, washing everything away, not to forget, but to begin again. The mornings came softly now. Linda no longer woke to the sound of other people moving around her, no longer braced for footsteps in the hallway or the clatter of dishes not cleaned the night before. Her world had grown quiet, but not empty. In place of noise, there was stillness. In place of expectation, peace. She made her tea slowly, watching the steam curl upward like a ribbon. The sea beyond her window sparkled in the early light, as if nothing had ever gone wrong. Linda picked up her journal, the one she'd kept hidden for years, the one she never thought she'd fill. Its cover was worn, corners curled like paper softened by rain. She turned to the final pages, took her pen, and began to write. Forgiveness is not an invitation back into my life. It's not a door I've left open. It's not even a whisper. Forgiveness is me setting down the weight you handed me and choosing to stop carrying it. She paused. They think I did this out of revenge, but it wasn't revenge. It was revelation. She set the pen down and closed the book gently, as if sealing something that no longer needed revisiting. For the first time, she felt the pain shift from something sharp and raw to something distant, a bruise, rather than a wound. Linda pulled a second envelope from her drawer. This one wasn't for Jason. It wasn't for Kayla. It was for Liam. She had written it carefully, rewriting parts, discarding early drafts. This one was perfect in its simplicity, truthful, tender, but unburdening. She tucked it into a padded envelope, added a photograph of the two of them from the park last summer, and sealed it. When you grow up, I hope you learn that love is not measured in how much you give up for someone, but how much of yourself you're allowed to keep. That was the line she hoped he'd remember. She mailed it that same afternoon, not with urgency, but with intention. The boy was young. He wouldn't understand now. But one day, when he found that letter again, tucked in a box, unearthed from a drawer, maybe years after she was gone, it would make sense. Back home, Linda sat by the window and watched a family walk past, parents laughing, a small girl tugging on her mother's hand, pointing toward the waves. She smiled, not with envy, but with contentment. She had raised her son the best she knew how. What he chose to do with that was his path, not her burden. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. I don't expect you to answer. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. Jason. She stared at it for a while, fingers hovering over the screen. Then she locked the phone and placed it face down on the table. Some doors don't need slamming. They just need to remain closed. That evening, she walked down to the beach, letting the sand shift beneath her feet. The wind carried salt and memory. She didn't try to hold on to either. She just kept walking. A child ran past, chasing a kite. Somewhere in the distance, gulls cried into the sky. Linda breathed in deeply, then exhaled with finality. Her life was not behind her. It was here, in this stillness, in this ownership of her own peace. She thought of all the women like her, women who gave and gave and gave until they forgot they were people and not just sources of comfort. Women who smiled through disrespect, who excused betrayal because it came dressed in family ties. Women who stayed quiet when their names were erased, their worth redefined as extra baggage. She had been one of them, but not anymore. That night, Linda logged into her email. She wrote a short post, unsigned, untagged, and submitted it to a forum for older women navigating late-life independence. There comes a time when silence is no longer strength, when you stop waiting for them to remember who you are and start reminding yourself instead. I used to think walking away meant failure. Now I know it means freedom. And peace? It's not given. It's claimed. She clicked send. The reply comments didn't matter. The act of saying it did. The next morning, she sat on the porch with her tea again. A neighbor waved. She waved back. Somewhere, the sound of a guitar drifted through an open window. Linda smiled, her eyes full but clear. Then, almost as if speaking to no one and everyone at once, she whispered, "I'm still here, and I'm finally enough." And if you were in her shoes, if the people you loved replaced you without hesitation, used your kindness as leverage, erased your name and called it necessary, would you have stayed silent? Or would you have walked away, calmly, deliberately, and written your name back into your own story?